In chapter 22 of The Wrong 10 Seconds, it's been a night of conflict in the midst of a heat wave. Phoebe's witnessed a xenophobic attack, while Lydia and Charlie argued about the fallout from his interview over the video. Now, we see how the night continues for Charlie. Chapter 22, Charlie, Wednesday night. Charlie had finally succumbed to the numbing corporate entertainment provided by the TV, passing a long day in front of it with Harriet. She didn't object, lulled into a hot stupor and cocooned in perspiration. Charlie's head buzzed, feeling vaguely concussed as if each angry internet response had dealt it a blow. In the evening, Marie had come to host Harriet. Once again, the little carer from the Philippines seemed subdued, but she helped give Harriet a cooling shower before getting her into bed. Harriet used to like showering after a busy summer day's work at the Transatlantic. As Marie prepared to leave, Charlie said, "You don't have to come, you know. I'm aware how angry everyone is. Others have quit." She looked at her tarnished black lace-up shoes. "I'm not angry. Also, I need the money." "Well," Charlie sighed, "I understand about needing money, but you don't seem yourself, if I may say so." She brushed back a strand of hair fallen from her shining top knot. "You were both nice to work with. It was strange to see what you did, but it didn't make me angry. I've seen a lot of people do a lot of things." There was no response for that. Who could say what things she compared his misdeed to? "It's my boyfriend. He wants the money, but I come here for it and he says, 'Oh, you don't care about dogs because you eat them in your country, even though we don't, like I am some dreadful person.'" "How unfair." Charlie sighed. "Sometimes I wonder if the people who read cruel intentions into our actions are the truly malicious ones themselves." She looked blank. He was being presumptuous again. Who was he to judge those who judged him? Charlie adjusted his glasses, which had slipped down his sweaty nose. "There's nothing you can do about it, your situation?" She shook her head, eyes to the floor again. "He's my home here. He just doesn't understand about my home there." Charlie's heart, bruised and battered though it was, twinged for the girl. Even for him it had been hard at times to leave his own country behind, despite exchanging a chaotic family for a wondrous wife. "Well, if there's—" He stopped himself from offering help. Of course he couldn't help. "I'm sorry I've made things worse." "See you day after tomorrow," she shrugged. For the second night in a row, Charlie didn't go to bed. He sat sweltering in the lounge, traversing the internet for signs of less hostile life. On the Carers Alliance page, members looked forward to the fete. Someone had sorted out insurance for a slip and slide. Another notice asked for large buckets or portable tubs to keep the drinks in ice. Carol had arranged a last-minute potluck, with people volunteering to bring crisps, squash or Victoria sponge. The absence of homemade pastry didn't seem to bother anyone. Charlie floundered back to the Citizen's website and the comments on his interview, just the sort of bitter remedy the British seemed fond of. Messages of semi-coherent rage toward all animal abusers appeared as he scrolled through, interspersed with a discussion on immigration. A single commentator, Breaking Bad 420, had taken it upon himself or herself to refute the posts suggesting immigrants like Charlie should not be permitted in the country. "He ran a small business," wrote Charlie's lone defender. "He probably created jobs. We need people like that, British or not." This provoked a predictable onslaught of locals informing Breaking Bad 420 that immigrants turned to crime. More intelligent objectors accused the government of not supporting its own citizens enough, allowing foreigners to seize opportunities because they were better equipped. "Then let's not blame the government's shortcomings on people who come into our country seeking opportunity. Britain is great because over the years, most of us have tried to improve socioeconomic mobility and reward hard work." "I'm not taking lessons from a cannabis addict on what makes my country great." An impressive understanding of the commenter's handle. Maybe Charlie's anonymous defender was an aging hippie like himself. Certainly the stranger was naive. Charlie never felt well equipped to open the pub. His absurd idealism and the delirious happiness he and Harriet found in each other powered them through. Leaving the perilous jungle of his browser, Charlie checked the barren landscape within his email inbox. His brothers and sisters stopped keeping in touch years ago. He was off the Carers Alliance contact list, but there was a message from Alfie yesterday. I'm really worried about you, Alfie had written, and this isn't coming from Lydia, it's coming from me. I follow what's going on because I care, and I think you're selling yourself short. Don't be afraid to say you're sorry. Don't be afraid to admit Mum won't get better. What most people think doesn't count for our family, you know that. You've raised us to be courageous. Please do the same yourself. Alfie never had a coming out moment. He'd always fancied boys and brought his classmates round to understanding this as normal. Far stranger things happen in nature all the time, he'd say, and Harriet would glow with pride. Charlie was proud too, every minute, but the warming blaze of Alfie's security sometimes singed him, casting a glare over his own insufficiency. What good had it been encouraging his son to be unafraid, when all the time Alfie had discerned Charlie's terror of failure? Harriet had known it. Lydia must too. Come to think of it, she never seemed surprised when Charlie screwed things up. I'll be there right away, she'd said when he told her about Harriet's stroke. And what was her reaction to this thing with the dog? She gazed at him and asked what happened. She knew he couldn't handle things properly. Charlie rifled through his CDs for encouragement. Bridge over troubled waters, blowing in the wind, I think it's going to rain today. Lyrics tangled in his brain, nesting and sprouting as he listened on the settee, his head in his hands. If someone would give him a chance, he would prove himself again. And fail, no doubt. First, he'd let down his family in America. He'd given his mother and the younger ones nearly every penny he earned, from his paper route when he was 8 to his assistant manager position at the nearby resort when he was 22. But starting the pub and raising children of his own before he knew it, Charlie suddenly had nothing to send them. Then there was his family here, and the pub. Look how that had ended up. Another CD ended. Charlie checked on Harriet by lamplight. Her hair bore a sheen of sweat, although the room felt cool after the airless lounge. Her catheter bag was nearly empty. Perhaps he should make her drink, but it seemed kinder to let her sleep. He turned her a few degrees to ease the pressure from where she'd been lying. Charlie knelt beside her bed and leaned his cheek on the nightstand so he could see her through the gap under the bed rail. He'd always worshipped her face, needed every inch of her. He couldn't confront that unfulfilled need without fleeing to some menial job. He was already failing. He let her choke yesterday. He must have nodded off, the fan whooshing over his head, for he woke up in the lamp's golden light with his face welted to the table leg, voices barging through the half-opened front window. A few men, young men, and at least one girl. Rare in this neighbourhood, only older people lived in the bungalows. It's here, the girl shouted. A jumble of men's voices, then a crash at the main window pane. Charlie lunged onto his stomach. Go back home, a boy yelled, half choked with fury and half with frenzied laughter the others shared. Their giddy explosion and release mirrored Charlie's own when he chased Ginger Nicky away. They were punishing him for being like them, without realizing the resemblance was punishment enough. We ain't having animal cruelty in this country. No one gets away with it. Charlie clasped Harriet's bed and squeezed his eyes shut. The sweltering heat became a New England summer night. A distant car alarm echoed crickets and Peeper's frantic call, and the shouts transformed into his father's drunken anger. Charlie should do something, grab the lamp, protect the little ones, protect Harriet. But helplessness weighed on him, every fibre taut with terror. When the poorly insulated walls and dim light of his childhood home dissolved from Charlie's memory, the street was quiet again. The attackers were gone, and he and Harriet were as safe as they could be with a dented window. His knees ached so much it seemed impossible to stand. Peeking below the bed rail, Charlie saw Harriet's eyes open, fear on her face, and a question in her eyes. How do we comfort each other in this? They couldn't. It would join Charlie's long list of subjects to be avoided. He hauled himself up, trying not to grimace. Let's see if that lets any more air in here. He lurched forward, striking the light switch and plunging them into darkness. Harriet made no response. Cool and blessedly hidden, he crashed down on his bed to doze fitfully for the rest of the night. The brick had edged a giant crystal blob on the window, tentacles stretched to the top and across to the right, while smaller spines radiated from the rest of the wound. Charlie dropped the curtain over the badge of shame, the ultimate symbol of failure, and stumbled about his work. He gave Harriet mint tea in bed. Her catheter bag wasn't nearly as full as it should be. He changed it and cleaned her and allowed her to rest. No help came this morning, and Harriet didn't try to make him talk about last night. She must have finally recognized his weakness and given up on changing it. He killed off a last piece of her. But he wouldn't fail her completely. By 7:30, Charlie sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea, his phone, and a fresh sheet of paper on her clipboard, where he usually took notes for Harriet's doctors about symptoms, or signs of progress he imagined in her, hopeless fool that he was. This morning, Charlie rang Celia. "I knew I'd find you awake," he remarked. "You're always boasting about what an early riser you are." "Some of us have a lot to accomplish in a day, Charles." "Naturally, So you've finally located the wherewithal to face me, have you?" Celia growled. "After your reckless behaviour, criminal even if reports are to be believed, and after your insolence in suggesting that I don't support my own family." Charlie sipped his tea and let her rant. The clock ticked above the hideous 1980s electric fire, with heavy wire grating and plastic lumps painted to poorly resemble stones. The clock must have missed its old dignified post at the pub, adorning authentic stonework and flanked by copper pots. For a minute, Charlie let the clock fully sweep him back to the transatlantic, the walls decorated with Lydia's drawings, the windowsills stages for Alfie's science experiments, Harriet laughing with some customers, and the river rushing out back. "Well, what do you have to say for yourself?" "Tell me, Celia, you always think of everything. What plans have you made for your declining health?" "My what? You impudent! You've done so well, but you must have considered emergencies and cased out the very best, most comfortable facilities." Charlie poised his pen over the clipboard and rooted his gaze to it, resisting the urge to look toward the bedroom. The lines on the paper swiveled in his concentration. "I've been offered places at Fernley Brook and Thistledown Manor, both the finest Cotswold locations." Charlie scribbled, shrinking his penmanship even more than usual. "If you think you're about to get rid of me, I assure you it will be precisely the other way round." "And I assure you that won't be necessary." Charlie hung up and sanitized his hands before moving to the computer to investigate Fernley Brook's and Thistledown Manor's histories with severely disabled residents. That's the end of chapter 22.